A river is supposed to be simple. Water falls. It finds the lowest path. It flows downhill. It joins other water. It reaches the sea. That is the story every river is supposed to tell. But some rivers did not get that version of the story. Some rivers run with water so acidic it dissolves metal. Some rivers flow in 5 colors simultaneously. Some rivers flow uphill in certain seasons. Some rivers cannot decide which ocean to reach and split themselves in two to solve the problem. Some rivers are invisible because they run entirely underground. One river on this list connects 2 of the largest river systems on Earth through a natural canal that scientists still argue about. Another glows at night. Another runs red not because of pollution but because of something that has been happening naturally for millions of years. Rivers are the oldest roads on Earth. Human civilization was built beside them. We understand them better than almost any other natural system, and yet the 15 rivers on this list refuse to behave the way rivers are supposed to. These are the 15 strangest rivers on the planet. Every fact about every one of them is real. Cano Cristales, Colombia. Most rivers have a color. Usually it is brown, blue, green, or some muddy variation of all 3 depending on the season. Cano Cristales, a 62-mile river flowing through the Serranía de la Macarena mountain range in the Colombian province of Meta, has 5 colors simultaneously. And it only does it for a few weeks each year, during a brief window between the wet and dry seasons, when the water level hits a specific balance that exists nowhere else, and creates conditions that nothing in any other river on Earth replicates. The colors come from a plant called Macarenia clavidura, a species of aquatic riverweed that lines the riverbed in large quantities throughout Cano Cristales. During the dry season, there is not enough water. During the wet season, the water flows too fast and deep, blocking sunlight. But during the short transition window, typically from September to November, the water drops to the precise level where sunlight reaches the riverbed at the angle needed to trigger the plant's reproductive process. When that happens, Macarenia clavidura turns a brilliant saturated red. Combined with the bright blue of the clear water above it, the yellow and black of the sandy and rocky bottom, and the green of the surrounding moss and algae, the river produces a flowing display of color that has earned it the names the liquid rainbow and the river of 5 colors. The colors are produced during the reproductive process of the aquatic plant. Visitors are not allowed to swim wearing sun lotion or bug spray, as the plants are sensitive to the chemicals. The Colombian government regulates access strictly. You cannot enter the national park without a licensed guide. Swimming is only permitted in designated areas, and the river is closed entirely during the dry season to allow the ecosystem to recover. What makes Cano Cristales genuinely strange is that the entire phenomenon depends on a biological process timed to a seasonal water level that has to be exactly right. Too much rain and you see an ordinary brown river. Too little and the plants die. The 5 colors only exist in the narrow window when everything is precisely balanced, in a river that has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. Rio Tinto, Spain. In the Andalusia region of southwestern Spain, a river runs from the Sierra Morena Mountains to the Gulf of Cadiz near the city of Huelva. From a satellite photograph, it looks like a wound in the landscape, a bright slash of deep red and orange cutting through green and brown terrain. The Rio Tinto runs a remarkable shade of red. It flows through an area unusually rich with sulfide ore deposits, which formed hundreds of millions of years ago when volcanoes were active in the area. When the metals in these buried deposits are exposed to water and oxygen, they produce acidic runoff that flows into streams and rivers. The result is a river with a pH of around 2.5, roughly the same acidity as vinegar or stomach acid, levels at which most life cannot survive. The water is so loaded with dissolved iron, copper, zinc, and other heavy metals that it kills virtually everything a normal river would support. Fish, most insects, most plants, gone. What survives in Rio Tinto are extremophile bacteria, organisms that have evolved specifically to thrive in conditions that would be lethal to almost anything else on the planet. Astrobiologists have a keen interest in the Rio Tinto because the region's soils have similarities to those on Mars. The iron and sulfate mineral rich in potassium mineral jarosite is common around the river and on the red planet. Since the jarosite and other minerals present in this part of Spain often contain signatures of bacterial activity, astrobiologists think studying how extremophiles live in and around the Rio Tinto may offer clues about how to search for evidence of life on Mars. NASA has used Rio Tinto as a testing site for Mars exploration robots, practicing how to find microbial life in extreme acidic environments before sending similar instruments to the surface of another planet. A red river in southern Spain has become a proxy for Mars. That is how strange this river is. The Rio Tinto usually maintains a pH close to 2.5 and high concentrations of pollutants along its course. Mining in the area dates back approximately 4,500 years, making it one of the oldest continuously mined regions on Earth. The river has been running red, in roughly its current form for all of that time. The Cassiquiare Canal, Venezuela. Every river has a watershed. The water that falls in one watershed flows into one river system. The water that falls in an adjacent watershed flows into a different one. Watersheds are fundamental to how rivers work. They define where water goes. They are the invisible borders that determine whether the rain that falls on a hillside eventually reaches the Pacific or the Atlantic. The Cassiquiare Canal in Venezuela ignores this completely. The Cassiquiare is a natural river, approximately 200 miles long, that branches off from the upper Orinoco River and flows southwest to join the Rio Negro, which is itself a major tributary of the Amazon. This means the Cassiquiare is a natural waterway connecting two of the largest river systems on Earth, the Orinoco and the Amazon, which flow into completely different oceans. Water from the Orinoco can travel through the Cassiquiare and reach the Amazon. The two great river systems of South America are, in a very real sense, connected through this single natural canal. The Cassiquiare River in Venezuela is the world's most famed river bifurcation. It is the world's largest river of the kind that links two major river systems. Researchers have described it as the hydrologic equivalent of a wormhole between two galaxies. Alexander von Humboldt, the great German naturalist and explorer, traveled the Cassiquiare in 1800 and produced one of the first scientific descriptions of it, confirming what indigenous people of the region had long known. European scientists at the time refused to believe that such a connection could exist naturally. They assumed a canal of this kind had to be built by humans. The idea that water would simply choose to connect two completely separate river systems on its own, without any human engineering, violated the rules of hydrology as they understood them. The rules of hydrology were wrong. The Cassiquiare exists. Water that begins in the Orinoco Basin reaches the Amazon Basin through a river that no human built. It is still happening right now. The Puerto Princesa Subterranean River, Philippines. The Puerto Princesa Subterranean River on the island of Palawan in the Philippines does something that rivers are not supposed to be able to do. It flows underground for approximately 8.2 kilometers through a mountain, through a series of cave chambers of extraordinary scale, before emerging into the South China Sea at the coast. Not underground in the sense of a culvert or a buried pipe. Underground in the sense of massive natural limestone cave chambers, some of them large enough to fit several city blocks inside. The river flows through darkness, through chambers with ceilings dozens of meters high, past stalactites and stalagmites that have been growing since before human civilization existed, through an environment that has no sunlight and no connection to the surface world except at its two ends. The cave system through which the river flows contains multiple large chambers. One of them, called the Italian Chamber, is so large it could fit the equivalent of several football fields inside. The river itself is fully navigable by boat for the entire underground stretch. Guided tours take visitors into the cave system in small boats, through passages where the only light comes from the boat's lamps, and where the scale of the cave architecture is visible only in sections as the beam moves across the ceiling. The subterranean river is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and was voted one of the new 7 Wonders of Nature in a 2011 competition. 8 reptile species live in and around the cave system. Large colonies of bats inhabit the upper reaches of the cave chambers, and the guano they produce over centuries has become a significant food source for the ecosystem inside. The river inside the cave is tidal in its lower sections, meaning seawater pushes back into the cave with the tide, creating a brackish environment where fresh water and salt water mix in complete darkness. A river that flows through a mountain for more than 8 kilometers and emerges directly into the sea at the coast, carrying its ecosystem with it in permanent darkness. There is no other river in the world quite like it. The Hinatuan Enchanted River, Philippines. In Mindanao, the second largest island in the Philippines, there is a short river that has mystified local communities and visiting researchers for a very different reason than the subterranean river on Palawan. The Hinatuan River, known universally as the Enchanted River, is almost impossibly blue. Not the blue of a shallow tropical sea, something deeper, something that looks, in photographs and in person, like the color of a gem rather than the color of water. The source of the Hinatuan River is not fully understood. It does not appear to be fed primarily by surface water. It is believed to be connected to an underground cave system and possibly to the sea, which would explain both the extraordinary water clarity and the remarkable blue color that comes from the depth of the water column and the clarity of the water above it. Marine species have been found in the river that should not exist in fresh water, suggesting that it connects to the ocean through passages that have not been mapped. The river is relatively short. It widens quickly into a pool-shaped body of water before flowing into the sea. It is surrounded by rainforest. At certain times, large schools of fish appear in the river in sudden, coordinated movements that local people describe as a ceremony. Researchers have noted the phenomenon without fully explaining the mechanism behind it. The fish appear to gather, circle, and then disperse in patterns that are unusual for the species involved. The enchanted river has been the subject of local legend for generations, and the legend, as is often the case, contains a truth the science has not yet fully caught up to. The water source is still disputed. The connection to the sea is unmapped. The full biology of what lives inside the deep section of the river has not been completely documented. The blue is real. The mystery underneath it is also real. The Rio Negro, Brazil, and Colombia. The Rio Negro is the largest blackwater river in the world and the largest tributary on the left bank of the Amazon. It is also one of the most visually dramatic natural phenomena in South America, because when the Rio Negro meets the Amazon River near the city of Manaus in Brazil, the two rivers flow side by side without mixing for approximately 6 kilometers. The Amazon at that point is a muddy, silty, brownish-yellow color, moving fast and loaded with sediment. The Rio Negro is dark, almost black, slow-moving, warm, and acidic. The difference in water temperature, speed, density, and chemical composition between the two rivers is significant enough that they physically resist mixing. They run alongside each other in visibly distinct lanes, black against brown, for 6 kilometers before they finally begin to blend. This meeting of the waters, as Brazilians call it, is visible from boats, from bridges, and from satellite imagery. It looks like a painting that someone has drawn a straight line through with 2 different brushes. The black color of the Rio Negro comes from dissolved organic material, primarily humic acid released by the breakdown of vegetation in the flooded forests through which the river passes. The water is so dark it appears black from above, but is actually a very dark transparent brown. Despite the color, it is relatively clean and low in nutrients compared to the Amazon loaded with sediment. The acidity of the Rio Negro also means it contains almost no mosquito larvae, making the river corridor significantly more free of mosquitoes compared to the surrounding Amazon basin. The meeting of the waters is one of the most visited natural phenomena in the Amazon region. It is also one that could only happen where 2 rivers with radically different characters choose the same channel at the same moment. The Amazon took millions of years to create this meeting. It lasts 6 kilometers before the 2 rivers surrender to each other and become one. The Yarlung Tsangpo, Tibet. The Yarlung Tsangpo is the highest major river on Earth. It begins on the Tibetan Plateau at an elevation of more than 4,500 meters above sea level, making it the starting point for a journey that becomes, kilometer by kilometer, one of the most dramatic descents any river makes anywhere on the planet. At its high plateau origin, the river is wide, flat, cold, and slow, moving through a landscape that looks like the surface of another world. The Tibetan sky above it is the deepest blue visible anywhere on Earth at ground level. The riverbanks are treeless and open. The water is clear and extremely cold. Then the river reaches the eastern end of the Himalayas and everything changes. The Yarlung Tsangpo plunges through what is called the Yarlung Tsangpo Grand Canyon, the deepest canyon on Earth, descending more than 2,700 meters over a relatively short distance in a series of rapids, gorges, and waterfalls that remain almost entirely unexplored because the terrain through which they pass is so extreme that reaching them has defeated numerous expeditions. At the bottom of this descent, the river crosses into India, where it becomes the Brahmaputra, one of the great rivers of South Asia, eventually flowing through Bangladesh and into the Bay of Bengal. This single river therefore begins at the roof of the world on the Tibetan Plateau, carves the deepest canyon on Earth, drops more than 2,700 meters in its middle section, and ends as one of the most important rivers on the Indian subcontinent. No other river on Earth undergoes a transformation of this scale across a single course. It begins in silence and thin air, and ends in one of the most densely populated river deltas on the planet. Scientists believe there may be a massive waterfall, potentially among the largest on Earth by volume, hidden somewhere in the unexplored sections of the Grand Canyon. Satellite imagery suggests the geography creates the conditions for it, but the terrain has blocked every attempt to reach it directly. The most dramatic feature of the most dramatic river descent on Earth may not yet have been seen by human eyes. The Roe River, Montana, United States. The Roe River in Great Falls, Montana holds the Guinness World Record for the shortest river in the world. It is 61 meters long. The Roe River connects Giant Springs, one of the largest freshwater springs in the world, to the Missouri River. The spring produces approximately 156,000 gallons of water per minute, which is an extraordinary volume. That water travels 61 meters and joins the Missouri. The river has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a current. It has banks. It is, by every technical definition, a river. It is also shorter than many swimming pools, and shorter than the distance between the front and back of a large building. You can walk its entire length in less than a minute. The Roe River became famous partly because of the slightly absurd competition it sparked. A class of high school students in Great Falls campaigned to have it recognized by Guinness as the world's shortest river in 1987, naming it in the process since it had no official name. The recognition worked. The city of Lincoln City, Oregon, immediately contested the title on behalf of their own Dee River, which they remeasured at high tide to reduce its recorded length. Guinness eventually retired the shortest river category entirely, apparently deciding that the rivalry between two American cities over which of their tiny rivers was shorter was not a competition worth adjudicating. The Roe River is still there. 61 meters of moving water with a name, a Wikipedia page, and a Guinness record that no longer officially exists. The Riffelsee River, Switzerland. There is a river in the Swiss Alps, near the Matterhorn, where the water flows in a direction that appears to violate basic physics. The Riffelsee sits above Zermatt at an elevation of about 2,757 meters. During certain seasons, water from the lake appears to flow uphill before descending. The effect is an optical illusion created by the specific geometry of the valley and the perspective from which the river is viewed. But it is compelling enough that it has attracted scientific attention and is documented in accounts of the phenomenon by hikers and researchers who have witnessed it. The river itself feeds into a cascade system that drops dramatically into the valley below Zermatt in a series of falls that produce a mist visible from considerable distances. The setting, with the Matterhorn visible from the lake and the water descending through alpine meadows toward the valley, makes it one of the most visually dramatic short river systems in Europe. What makes the Riffelsee River strange is this specific optical quality, the way the terrain combines with the viewing angle to make water appear to flow upward, which has made it a subject of study for researchers interested in how perception shapes our understanding of natural features. A river is supposed to flow downhill. Everything about how we read landscape tells us water moves one way. When it appears to move the other, even briefly, and even as an illusion, it exposes something about the assumptions built into how we see the world around us. The Waitomo Glowworm Stream, New Zealand. Beneath the rolling farmland of the Waikato region on New Zealand's North Island, a river flows through a cave system that is unlike almost any other cave environment on Earth. The Waitomo Caves contain a species of bioluminescent glowworm called Arachnocampa luminosa, which exists only in New Zealand and is not related to the firefly, despite producing a similar light that is blue and green. Tens of thousands of these organisms cover the cave ceiling above the underground river, producing a continuous glow that turns the cave ceiling into what visitors consistently describe as a night sky of stars of blue-green light reflected in the black water below. The river that flows through the cave carries visitors in silent boats through chambers where the only light is biological. The glowworms produce their light as larvae to attract insects, which are caught in sticky threads the larvae hang from the ceiling. The light is a trap. The ceiling of stars is a hunting strategy. The beauty of the cave is, from the perspective of the creatures creating it, entirely functional and entirely predatory. The Waitomo cave system was formed over approximately 30 million years by the dissolving of limestone by acidic water. The current cave system took shape relatively recently in geological terms. The river inside it carved the chambers it now flows through, and those chambers were then colonized by a species that turned the darkness into the illusion of a night sky. You can take a boat through this river. You sit in silence because noise disturbs the glowworms. You float through a cave lit by tens of thousands of living creatures using their bodies to hunt, and from below, it looks like the most peaceful and beautiful thing in the world. The Fly River, Papua New Guinea. The Fly River is one of the largest rivers in Papua New Guinea, and one of the least explored major rivers in the world. It drains an enormous area of lowland tropical forest in the south of the country, moving slowly through a landscape that transitions from highland tributaries to enormous lowland floodplains before reaching the Gulf of Papua. What makes the Fly River genuinely strange is its biology. The river system is home to the Fly River turtle, the largest freshwater turtle in the world, which can reach the size of a dinner table and has a long, distinctive nose used to breathe while remaining submerged. It is also home to the Fly River crocodile population, sawfish that grow to extraordinary sizes, and the Mekong giant freshwater stingray species found in this and other large Southeast Asian river systems. But the most remarkable biological fact about the Fly River is what it contains at its surface. The river passes through one of the most pristine and biologically rich rainforest environments remaining on Earth. Species new to science are still being documented in its basin. The fish population of the Fly River system includes species found nowhere else. The isolation of the surrounding terrain, which is almost entirely inaccessible by road, has meant that the river's biology has developed with minimal human disturbance for the majority of its length. The Fly River is one of the few remaining major rivers on Earth that runs mostly through wilderness. The thing that makes it strange is the thing that is becoming increasingly rare. It is a river that has not yet been changed beyond recognition. The North Two Ocean Creek, Wyoming, United States. In a remote section of the Teton Wilderness in Wyoming, there is a small stream where a single drop of water falling into the creek at a specific point cannot decide which ocean to reach. North Two Ocean Creek flows through a flat mountain meadow at the Continental Divide. At one point, the creek splits. One branch, Atlantic Creek, flows east toward the Yellowstone River and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. The other branch, Pacific Creek, flows west toward the Snake River and eventually into the Pacific Ocean. The split point, known as the parting of the waters, is the only place in North America where a fish can theoretically swim from one ocean drainage to the other without leaving a connected water system. This is not a metaphor. During high water, when the two branches are connected by a shallow overflow, a fish entering the split from one side could swim through to the other drainage. Cutthroat trout from the Pacific drainage have been found in the Atlantic drainage of Yellowstone, and researchers believe the parting of the waters is the mechanism by which the species cross the Continental Divide. Located in northwest Wyoming, North Two Ocean Creek moves through a canyon. As it leaves the canyon, it divides into Atlantic Creek, which flows to the Yellowstone River and the Atlantic Ocean, and Pacific Creek, which flows into the Snake River. The bifurcation is known as the parting of the waters, and is accessible for visitors in Yellowstone National Park. A small mountain stream in Wyoming that connects two oceans, allows fish to cross the Continental Divide, and sits at the exact point where North America divides its water between the Pacific and the Atlantic. The scale of what this small creek does is completely disproportionate to how it looks on the ground. The Ob River, Siberia. The Ob River is one of the three great rivers of Siberia, flowing from the Altai Mountains northward for approximately 3,650 kilometers before emptying into the Arctic Ocean. What makes the Ob strange is what happens to it every winter and every spring, at a scale that is difficult to comprehend. When the Ob freezes in late autumn, it freezes from the north first, because the northern sections are colder. The southern sections freeze later. When spring arrives, the southern sections thaw first, sending enormous volumes of water north toward the sections that are still frozen solid. The water has nowhere to go. The river backs up. The flooding that results covers an area so vast that the Ob's floodplain, already one of the largest in the world, expands to a width of up to 50 kilometers in some sections. The entire surrounding landscape becomes a temporary inland sea every spring, and then drains again as the northern ice finally gives way. This seasonal flood is not a disaster. It is the natural rhythm of the Ob, and it has shaped the ecology of western Siberia for tens of thousands of years. The vast wetlands, forests, and peatlands of western Siberia, which store enormous quantities of carbon and support ecosystems found nowhere else, exist because of this annual flooding cycle. The Ob does not just flow through western Siberia, it built it. The peatlands that the Ob's flooding cycle maintains are among the most significant carbon stores on Earth. As the climate warms and the flooding pattern changes, scientists monitoring the Ob are watching to understand what happens when a river that built a continent changes the way it behaves. The Blood Falls, Antarctica. In the McMurdo dry valleys of Antarctica at the end of the Taylor Glacier, there is a waterfall that runs red, not occasionally, not from a recent event, constantly. The water that pours from a crack in the glacier's face is a deep, saturated red that stains the surrounding ice and flows toward Lake Bonny below. It has been running this color since it was first observed by the geologist Griffith Taylor in 1911, who assumed the color came from red algae. It does not come from algae. Beneath the Taylor Glacier, trapped in a pocket that was sealed off from the atmosphere approximately 1.5 million years ago, there is a highly saline lake. The water in this lake is about 3 times saltier than the ocean. It is extremely cold, below the normal freezing point, but does not freeze because of the salt content. It is also completely isolated from the outside world and from oxygen. In that isolation, over the course of 1.5 million years, ancient microorganisms metabolized the sulfates in the water and produced iron compounds that turned the water red with dissolved iron. The water is so rich in iron that when it reaches the surface and contacts oxygen in the air, the iron oxidizes, the same chemical reaction that turns metal red with rust, and the waterfall runs red. The microorganisms that have been living in this sealed brine pocket in complete darkness and without oxygen for 1.5 million years are studied by astrobiologists looking for models of how life might survive on other planets where oxygen, sunlight, and surface water are absent. A red waterfall in Antarctica is a window into both the ancient history of Earth and the possibility of life beyond it. The Jinsha River, China. The Jinsha River, which forms the upper section of the Yangtze River before it is joined by major tributaries that give it its full volume, runs along one of the most geologically active and seismically unstable corridors in China. It passes through the 3 parallel rivers region of Yunnan province, where the Jinsha, the Langkang, and the Nu rivers run in parallel courses separated by mountain ranges for hundreds of kilometers, an arrangement that exists nowhere else on Earth and was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its extraordinary geological and biological significance. What makes the Jinsha particularly strange is the speed of its geological transformation. The river is actively cutting downward into the plateau at one of the fastest rates measured for any river on Earth. The Tiger Leaping Gorge, carved by the Jinsha in Yunnan province, is one of the deepest gorges in the world, with the river running more than 3,000 meters below the surrounding peaks at its deepest point. The gorge is still getting deeper. The river is still cutting. The landscape that surrounds the Jinsha is being actively remade by the water moving through it at a pace that is geologically fast. 3 of Asia's greatest rivers running parallel through the same mountain range for hundreds of kilometers, each one cutting its own gorge through terrain that is being actively reshaped by the cutting. The Jinsha is not strange because of what it looks like at any given moment. It is strange because of what it is in the process of becoming. The darkling river of the Okavango, Botswana. Most rivers reach the sea. The Okavango River flows from the highlands of Angola into the Kalahari Desert in Botswana and then simply stops. It does not reach any ocean. It does not join another river system. It does not disappear underground to emerge elsewhere. It fans out into a vast inland delta of channels, islands, and seasonal floodplains covering approximately 15,000 square kilometers. And then the water slowly evaporates and filters into the desert sand. The Okavango Delta is the largest inland delta in the world, a river system that pours all of its water into a desert and loses it entirely to heat and sand. Yet despite ending in a desert, the Okavango Delta is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in Africa. Hundreds of species of birds, dozens of large mammals including lions, elephants, hippos, leopards, and wild dogs, and an extraordinary array of fish and reptiles live in a system built by a river that arrives from somewhere else and never leaves. The flooding of the delta is driven by rainfall in Angola, far to the north, meaning the flood arrives in Botswana's dry season when it is most needed, making the delta's life cycle run in apparent contradiction to the climate around it. When the Kalahari is driest and hottest, the Okavango floods. When the rains come to Botswana, the delta is at its lowest. A river that crosses a continent, arrives in a desert, refuses to continue to the sea, and instead builds the richest wildlife ecosystem on the continent, in the place where it decides to stop. The Okavango is the only river on Earth that chose a desert as its destination and turned the choice into something extraordinary. These 15 rivers share nothing except the fact that they all broke a rule that rivers are supposed to follow. Rivers are the oldest roads on Earth. We have mapped them, named them, dammed them, rerouted them, poisoned some of them, and depended on all of them for everything that human civilization has been built on. And after all of that, rivers like the Casiquiare, the Cano Cristales, the Bloodfalls, and the Okavango are still out there doing things that the standard model of how a river works cannot fully explain. The planet still has surprises. Most of them are in the water. Which of these rivers do you most want to see with your own eyes? Leave it in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring the places on this planet that refuse to behave the way they are supposed to, subscribe to Parallel Facts. We will keep going.